Respected today's speakers, Professor K.S. Shesan Garu and Professor Adapa Satyanarayana Garu, today's webinar's president, Professor Ganta Chakrapani Garu, discussant Professor E. Sudharani Garu, and my dear participants, good afternoon to you all. It gives immense pleasure to welcome you all to today's webinar on freedom movement in Telangana. In fact, Department of History has been organizing many seminars, many international symposiums on different topics. Recently, Department of History has organized one international symposium on Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, democracy and nationalism. Like that, in 2014 to 16, on Telangana area also, many seminars Department of History has organized. Like that, today's webinar, Department of History is organizing today's webinar on the eve of Azadi Ka Amrita Mahotsav, 75-year commemoration of 75 years of Indian independence. Department of History is a very important department in our Ambedkar Open University. We offer courses like BA History, MA History, MPhil, PhD, and PG Diploma in Culture and Heritage Tourism. Almost 43,842 students enrolled in the Department of History in our university. We can compare to other conventional universities. Our history students and learners are more than other conventional universities. And our university in the Ambedkar Open University, Department of History offers courses BA History in all the streams. Like in BSc student also can opt history. We have introduced choice-based grade system in 2017. Previously also we have this facility. Like that, we, almost 20 scholars are pursuing PhD MPhil in our department. They are choosing topics like regional history, local history, and Dakkan history in medieval, modern, and ancient Indian history areas. They are also seriously pursuing their PhDs. And also we offer MA courses in different aspects of history, like socio-economic history of ancient India, modern India. We focus on socio-economic areas, and also we have courses like Hyderabad history, AP history, and modern revolutions, ancient civilizations, historical methods and historiography, and national movement, so social history of modern India, and also contemporary history of India. Like many courses we are offering for this from our department. This seminar's theme is freedom movement in Telangana. I request from my department, as a head of the department, I thank today's speakers, Professor K.S. Shesan Garu and Professor Adapa Satyanarayana Garu, Professor Ganta Chakrapani Garu, Professor Sudharani Garu, and my colleague Dayakar Garu and other participants. Thank you very much from my heart, because your acceptance is most important for this program. Now I request today's president, Professor Ganta Chakrapani Garu, to conduct the further proceedings. Thank you, one and all. Not able to hear your voice, sir.
Yeah, now your technical people just now they opened the mic. Thank you. So I'm struggling to open on the mic. Yeah, good afternoon, all. I welcome all the participants as well as two distinguished speakers of this webinar and afternoon session. I mean, a wonderful evening. First of all, I welcome Professor Shesan Garu. I hope Professor Shesan already joined in the meeting. Professor Shesan is a very eminent teacher and also retired professor of history from University of Hyderabad, and he is a very well-known personality among academics, particularly in the history, in the field of history. Welcome you, sir. And also welcome Professor Radappa Satyanarayana garu. Radappa Satyanarayana is also a great, teacher as well as very distinguished scholar in the field of history, particularly in the field of regional history. Is an authentic person in Telangana history also. I welcome Sudharani garu. Sudharani garu, she is director academic, and I know she is one of the senior most teachers of this university, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar University. And I first of all, at the outset, I'd like to congratulate our history department, for their, contribution to Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav season. Government of India, they are celebrating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav since last 1 year. In our university, I can say history department is the first department to initiate various academic activities on the occasion of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. I feel as a dean of faculty of social sciences, I feel proud about the Department of History and their teamwork.
Some technical problem. Voice not able to hear. Sir, we're not able to hear your voice, sir. Unmute this.
On 14th of beautiful seminar, very thematically, it's a very great seminar on international seminar on Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and his contribution. And that was the first one. And now they are organizing this lecture program on freedom movement in Telangana. Yeah, I'm really, I appreciate them once again for their, for choosing a rare and, great kind of theme. Because, as a sociology teacher and, a person who involved in Telangana movement very seriously, I used to talk about, the independent and autonomous status of Telangana as a state, Telangana as a country also, as a nation also, at one point of time. During that movement debates, in one TV channel, that anchor asked me why there is no freedom movement in Telangana. Why Telangana people are not participated in liberation movement of India. It's a very deep and a very interesting question. But as a non-history person, I just, generally in television programs, what we do is we generally try to guess. And of course, my understanding why Telangana is not part of Indian freedom movement. Then I referred, I spoke to various people and, I referred. It's really unfortunate. Even Indian History Congress also did recognize Telangana movement, freedom movement in Telangana as freedom movement. And they didn't even include it in their volume, where Professor Ramakrishna was, also part of that editorial team. And I discussed it with Ramakrishna also. But what finally, it was a serious kind of search for me. I think, today I'm going to get some answer because, Professor Sheshan is going to talk on Telangana freedom revolt since 1800 and or so on and so forth. So, but my understanding, for the benefit of our students who joined in this meeting also, not only historians, nobody in the government also not considered Telangana as part of India. Telangana and Nizam state is independent and autonomous state. And they never recognized the whatever the so-called revolts or, movements or, it's maybe kind of solidarity meetings also held. But they considered India means which is under British rule, number one, and freedom struggle means against British and British rule, number two, and number three, their map of India is exclusive of or except Hyderabad and Jammu and Kashmir. So they consider these two because these two are merged after independence, not even before independence. Maybe in that way, we are not part of British India. That was one convincing, kind of point. And number two, they never considered as Indians by that time till 1948, September 17th, probably, because we have standstill agreement and status quo rules and agreements with the government of India as counterpart, as non-government of India. So several such kind of things are there. But even though, I think, now today, Professor Sheshan Garu is trying to bring out those dark shades and, what happened in those dark shades of Nizam, under Nizam rule, and how the freedom related or independence related, struggles were, consolidated and, raised here in Hyderabad state. It's going to be a very, very interesting topic. Thank you, Sheshan sir, for taking this, topic. It's very curious, and we are very curious, not only me, general audience as well as people of Telangana also would like to know what is real, story of freedom movement of Telangana. Whether it is a freedom movement against, of course, I should appreciate, once again, our organizers. They have very, very deliberately, probably, they have, they choose two different historians. One is pre-Telangana, non and the freedom movement against British, number one. In that way, it is very simple. And the freedom movement against Nizam. There are two different freedom movements, because our immediate authority or our immediate governance, our immediate boss is Nizam. And people of Telangana fought against Nizam also very vehemently and very seriously. And similarly, we expressed, again, I'm politically, I should be correct. Again, I'm saying we expressed our total solidarity to freedom movement of India and those who are fighting against British rule. I think these two definitely they are going to give us a comprehensive picture on All India freedom movement as well as Hyderabad based anti-Nizam autonomous Hyderabad freedom movement, and these two definitely certainly going to help. In this way, I think history department is on one hand they are comprehensively putting Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav context. They are comprehensively bringing out both the moments. Both are, of course, both are, those Hyderabad movement also now celebrating 75 years of Saida Poratam. So Telangana Saida Raitanga Poratam also celebrating 75 years. And also Azadi Ka, All India Azadi also celebrating the same. It is going to be a great contribution. I once again welcome the resource persons and research scholars and students and other fraternity of our university. Because of very bad throat, I cannot speak more than this. Thank you very much. Now I request Sudharani to take over and conduct the proceedings.
Thank you, Professor Chakrapani, Dean Social Sciences, for his very, very apt introduction of the subject today. He has taken he has rather told the soul of our selecting the theme, because this agony of absence of Telangana history, rather Telangana, if anyone talks about Telangana, they talk about Telangana armed struggle, they talk about anti-Nizam struggle in Telangana, but very scanty reference is made in All India context, because I have been the member of the Indian History Congress, South India, and particularly down to AP and Telangana History Congresses also. Very, very little research has been done on this area. First of all, because the long drawn struggle of the Telangana people in the early 19th century itself against British authorities who stationed here, as well as Nizam, is a glorious chapter in Indian history. But unfortunately, this history has been sidelined, not been researched much upon. So at the outset, I welcome all all of you, especially Professor K.S.S. Session, sir. He is stationed at Madanpalli, very far from here. Morning he was talking 700 miles from kilometers from where Hyderabad, and for very kind enough to accept our invitation and be with us today for this coming 2 hours with us. And I also welcome Professor Adapa Satyanarayana sir, who is my guru, not only a mentor in all the activities, academic activities, and he's an authority on the Telangana history. And I'll just talk about few lines why we have chosen the theme. Very aptly, Chakrapani sir reminded about how the Telangana history needs to be focused. Since the formation of the state of Telangana, we brought out a book on the directions of again Chakrapani and TSPSC to Telangana history and culture. So we struggled a lot to bring about the ancient, medieval, and modern Telangana history. Though our course material in Ambedkar Open University contains about the Telangana, but it is not formed as a separate book on Telangana history. So after the formation of Telangana, we brought out the Telangana ancient, medieval, as well as modern history, and Telangana movement also. So how this struggles, because very few of us know that the anti-imperialist, anti-British, and anti-Nizam struggles, the people's struggles started way back to 1800 itself, because Nizam signed a treaty with the Britishers in 1800. Then onwards, the British interference in Hyderabad state affairs started. So with that, there was a sudden change in the administration, and the British interference started growing more and more. So the officers here, Raja Rai Rambha and Mahipat Ram and Ismail Yarzang, all these officers, they started revolting or protesting against the British interference. This was the beginning. And later, the Ramji Gond to Revaz Khan, you all know 1857 revolt time. There is the attack on residency, Ramji Gond uprisings in the second half of 19th century, and the secular nationalist consciousness emerged with the library movement and all. As student of history, we all read about that the early national leaders and the organizations, right from Arya Samaj, Andhra Mahasabha, Andhra Janas Kendra Sangam, Andhra Mahasabha, and Hyderabad State Congress, which formed very late, and the spark ignited by the Vande Matra movement at Usmania University, and how this Komram Bhimu's uprising, Ramji Gond's revolt against the British. So all this, they are the glorious incidents, and their sacrifice to the liberation is not at all justified, put into justice by the historians or historical writings. So Telangana people's combined and consistent resistance, one against the British forces here, imperialistic forces, and as a part of the nationalist struggle all over India, and the Nizam is till it merged, because rest of the India, they have witnessed the freedom 1947 August 15th. But as rightly said by Chakrapani, the people of Kashmir and Junagadh and Hyderabad, they couldn't merge with the Indian Union, but they have seen the breath the freedom. They have tasted the freedom in 1948 with the liberation or the merger of Indians, the Hyderabad state into Indian Union. So this is precisely the theme which we have chosen. First, we wanted to begin with the anti-British, early anti-British revolts in Hyderabad state, 1800 to 1857 by Session sir. And we'll take over to you the people's resistance against Nizam. And this will be clubbed. Professor Adapa Satyanarayana sir will club both these nationalist movements, though not consistently done, because the presence of the Gashti Nishan 53 and several restrictions on the people's assemblage in Hyderabad state by the Nizam government. So this is precisely what we thought that, to find answers, not only answers to the questions raised by all of them, whether there exists any national movement in Telangana state or Telangana region of Hyderabad state. So there are several instances and movements, but that is not being put into the limelight. That is the answer. And one more thing, this writing of history is in the beginning stage, what I could see that, because Andhra, it is under Madras presidency, so leaders participation and women's participation, everything is being recorded. But in Telangana, Veldurti Manikirao, and certain books, Sarojini Regani, Highlights of Freedom Movement, and Rameshan, Freedom Struggle in Hyderabad state. So there are certain efforts to record the history, but in popular writings, there are very few. It's my pleasant privilege to introduce the first speaker, Professor K.S.S. Session, former head of the Department of History, University of Hyderabad. He taught history in Besant Theosophical College, Madanpalli, and he also sometime associated with the Assam Central University, Silchar. He was a founder head Department of History, has large number of PhD and MPhil scholars during the course of his long journey of academic, and visited several universities, Oxford, Glasgow, Swansea, Wales, Manchester, Edinburgh, UK, where he participated in several events. And his biographical details are featured in Reference Asia, Volume 9, Asia Who is Who, Refacimento International, 1995. He wrote several books: British Rule in Indian Economy, Hyderabad, Tipu Sultan of Mysore, etc. He's a regular writer to Hindu, Deccan Herald, and the State Times. He wrote on several historical times. Moreover, Sir is being our content editor and associated with the our course material since long. His long association with Ambedkar is noteworthy. And thank you, sir, for being with us on this event. And Professor Adapa Satyanarayan, sir, his long struggle launched by the people of Telangana. This is being brought out by Adapa Satyanarayan, sir, and he is an international scholar, and he did his postdoctorals in Germany, and he visited several countries in America, US and UK, and he's a scholar in visiting scholars in Japan and USA. And sir wrote several books on Telangana history, Telangana culture, and his books has been a reference source for most of the scholars like us. And he's been his long journey of academic journey in Usmania University, head Department of History, and after his work in TSPSC as academic associate, the consultant, and he is instrumental in bringing out the Telangana history and culture book and several other books. And right now, sir is also, along with sir, we are all planning to bring out in the context of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, the Telangana freedom movement in Telangana, taking out the freedom struggle from all the districts of Telangana, erstwhile districts, not the present districts of Telangana, how many leaders participated and what are the movements they led. And sir is right now associated with, again, Usmania University, and as an adjunct professor. And his contribution to the historical field is noteworthy, and recently brought about on Ambedkar in Telangana, in Hyderabad state. So with this brief introduction, because these two resource persons are they are doyens of their own contribution in the field of history, and the themes are also chosen, as said by our dean, that we'll begin with the early revolts, and then we'll go on to the till the merger of Hyderabad state into Indian Union. Thank you for this, for giving this opportunity. Sir, Chakrapani sir. I request our Dean, sir. Okay. Yeah. Now I call upon Professor Session, sir, to speak on the early revolts against the British in Hyderabad state.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, sir.
I hope I am audible.
Yes, sir.
Professor
Yes.
Sudharani garu.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon to Professor Chakrapani, the Dean, Social Sciences, Ambedkar University, Professor Sudharani, Head of the Department of History, Mr. Professor Srinivas and other faculty members, research scholars and friends. That will include everybody. At the outset, I am highly thankful to the organizers of this webinar for having thought of me to be a part of the webinar, which is being organized as a part of the ongoing Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. In the introductory part, Professor Chakrapani garu has raised certain questions, and my effort is made easy by his raising the questions. I think I will try to answer, and that will be the job that is given to me, because whatever I thought of sharing with you, it has been very succinctly put in the form of one or two questions by Professor Chakrapani. So that will serve as an effective introduction for my topic even. He raised the question whether the struggle that was carried on in Hyderabad, erstwhile Hyderabad state, was it really a national movement? Was it an independence movement? Or it was a struggle against the Nizam or the struggle against the British? So this is a very pertinent question. And we'll start off here, because the topic given to me by Professor Sudharani is anti-British revolts in Hyderabad state prior to early anti-British. See, they prior to 1857, because 1857 is a milestone, and in the long history of our struggle against the British, 1857 marks a very important epoch. After 1857, we clearly see it was a struggle for independence. But before that, was there no struggle? Was there no movement? Was there no anti-British sentiments among the people? There were in plenty. But here, in the long course of freedom struggle or independence movement, see, there are certain issues, certain incidents, certain movements which can be directly connected to that of the independence struggle. But that does not mean that the earlier struggles were in vain. See, prior to 1857,
So your video got stuck up. We couldn't.
political rule, foreign colonial rule of the British. And I tell you, these were all the basic things, and the later struggles depended upon them. So that does not mean that the earlier struggles have gone in vain. No, they must not have achieved the goals for which they have started. Those movements must have been, you can't call them as failures. To that matter, even during the period of the famous freedom movement, there were many movements which are started by Gandhi, and they did not come out successful till 1942, till the Quit India movement. They were started. There was a kind of all India movement, like non-cooperation movement or civil disobedience movement. To that matter, even Quit India movement, they did not achieve the objectives for which they were started. But that does not mean that they were all failure, because the later struggles depended upon the success or failure done during the earlier phases. So that way, this particular struggle can be divided into two: post 1857 and pre 1857. And the topic given to me is up to 1857 as far as Hyderabad was concerned. So here I would like to point out to you that the opposition to the British rule started probably, it's a slight exaggeration, probably on the same day when they set their foot here in India. See, almost from the beginning, there were some sections somewhere, people were opposed to it. They did not like the way in which India was ruled by the British, even during the period of the company administration. So my exercise today with you, my thinking with you will be, what were the struggles against the British alone, British, not against the Nizam, because at that period of time, anti-Nizam sentiments have not grown, because he was all in all. The Nizam was almost like a despot, and he was trying to quell the entire public opinion. It was kept under his control. You see, we will confine only to the anti-British struggles which happened in Hyderabad state prior to 1857. To bring it to your notice that see, the entire South India, not only in north, in the north there was the struggle against the British rule was despised. But if you think in terms of South India, you hear about the eastern Palegars in the far south, like Veerapandi Kattabomman was the foremost in raising a banner of revolt against the British. Similarly, in the western part, Pulidevar, he was highly responsible, and we do hear the stories about Pulidevar, how he struggled against the British rule in that particular part. And Maruthu brothers in Coimbatore, they were also very vociferous, and they have, without minding for their own safety, bartering their own lives, they fought against the Maruthu brothers. Similarly, in Malabar region, Veluthambi, and in the Kannanur area, there was a Palasi Raja. We hear a number of such nearer to our Hyderabad. The Kittur Rani Chennamma, she revolted in 1824. Single-handedly, she revolted against the British, and you cannot but accept that it was a kind of freedom struggle. She must not have imagined the kind of India, and then she wanted to drive away the British from India in order to get independent. That concept may not be there, but she revolted against the British. She showed the sentiments for Indians were much against the British rule. Similarly, in Andhra region in 1846, 11 years before 1857, there was Narasimha Reddy revolt. Koyilakuntla Narasimha Reddy, he revolted against the British, and recently some movies also have been produced on the life and times of Narasimha Reddy. So that way, in South India also, there were many areas where people struggled in order to show their sentiments against the British rule. And what was the role? What was the net result on account of such as they were all sporadic?
Hello, Srinivas.
Sir,
Sudhakar. Sudha, what is happening, Amma?
sessions are being routed. Hello, sir.
Is it okay? Sir, connect and disconnect, huh?
Sir,
యా సార్ సార్ దగ్గర ఆడియో పోయినట్టుంది సార్, మా వాళ్ళు ట్రై చేస్తున్నారు.
Okay, okay, okay.
మన టెక్నికల్ టీం వాళ్ళు ట్రై చేస్తున్నారు. దే విల్ కనెక్ట్.
Yeah.
వన్ మూమెంట్ సార్. యా టెక్నికల్ టీమ్ అంబేద్కర్ ఓపెన్ యూనివర్సిటీ యశ్వంత్ ప్లీజ్ సార్ ట్రై చేయండి, కాల్ చేసి వెరిఫై చేయండి.
Professor Session sir's connection is discontinued, it seems. He's trying again to get connect with us. Hello.
యా
Chakrapan sir.
యా
Yashwant, ఒక నిమిషం.
యశ్వంత్ చూడు, సార్ దగ్గర ప్రాబ్లం, మన దగ్గర ఎవరైనా మేడం మీరు ఒకసారి ప్రొఫెసర్ శేషన్ గారికి ఫోన్ లో ట్రై చేయండి, అక్కడ ఏమైనా ప్రాబ్లం ఉందా. శ్రీనివాస్ గారు వడ్డాను, ప్రొఫెసర్ శ్రీనివాస్ గారు. ఫ్రెండ్స్ రీకనెక్ట్ చేస్తున్నారు, మీరు ఓపికతో ఉండండి. శేషన్ గారి దగ్గరే ప్రాబ్లం వచ్చింది టెక్నికల్ గా. హోప్ఫుల్లీ వి రిజ్యూమ్ ఇట్ వెరీ సూన్. కన్వర్ట్లో వినిపించలేదు కూడా. సార్ శేషన్ సార్, కెన్ యూ హియర్ us? Can you hear me, sir? వెల్కమ్ బ్యాక్ సార్. సారీ, టెక్నికల్ ఇష్యూ తోటి కొంత డిస్టర్బెన్స్ వచ్చింది. సార్ ఈజ్ ఇట్ ఓకే నౌ సార్? శేషన్ గారు,
సార్ కి ఆడియో కనెక్ట్ కాలేదు.
అదే అంటే సార్ దగ్గర ప్రాబ్లం, మన దగ్గర ఓకే బాగానే ఉంది.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me, Sudharani garu? Hello.
Yes.
Hello. Hello.
We can hear you, sir. We can hear.
No problem. You can continue, sir.
I'm sorry, there was some problem with the connectivity. See, that way, what happened in Hyderabad state prior to 1857, it was purely against the British, against the presence of the British. And here, what was this role of the British here in Hyderabad state? It was not directly ruled by the British. It was an indirect rule that was established, as once Sudharani was pointing out. 1800 was the Wellesley's subsidiary alliance. But much before that, the British arrival was there in 1766 itself in Hyderabad. Then there was an alliance signed with Nizam Ali, the then Nizam of Hyderabad state, by which he has given away all the coastal Andhra districts, sarkars. And then 22 years later, and again another alliance was there by which he has given away Guntur. It was in 1800 that Rayalaseema was ceded to the British. So that way, British after 1800, their presence was very clear, and they have decided to stay on with an indirect rule in Hyderabad state. The Nizam was reduced to a puppet. So this was not to the liking of the people of Hyderabad state. People in the sense, not the commoners, but the nobles, they protested. The gentry, apart from the family members of the Nizam, also protested against it, but the Nizam was obedient to the British. That was the difference. So the very first strains of revolt against the British was witnessed by one of the courtiers of the Nizam. As we were pointing out earlier, Professor Sudharani, not much is known about many of these revolts against the British. The first and foremost, according to me, was the revolt of Mahipatram in 1808 against the British presence. Because here he had the support and goodwill of the Nizam himself. In the heart of hearts, the Nizam was against the British, but openly he could not express it because he was guided by, he was conditioned by the numerous alliances that his forefathers, particularly his father, has signed in 1766, 1788, and even in 1800. Incidentally, all these major alliances were signed by one individual Nizam, that was Nizam Ali. So by the time Sikandar Jah became the ruler in 1803, you find there was a strong public opinion among the nobility that these alliances were to be abjured. They should be removed. They should come out of the alliances, and the independence of the Nizam should be restored, so that the separate identity of Hyderabad state and the authority of the Nizam would continue. That was the opinion of many of these nobles. And thus in the court also, there were two diagonally opposite opinions which have come into being. One was they wanted to be very loyal to the British and get along. Another was they wanted to be away from the alliances so that independence of the Nizam would be ensured, and working under an independent Nizam would ensure their power, prosperity, prestige. That is how the entire court was divided into two divisions. Among the two divisions, Mahipatram headed the latter one, that is the critics of the British. He was in the initial stages, he was a supporter of the British. Later on, it turned out to be that he became the arch rival of the British, and he wanted to get independence for his close friend. The Nizam happened to be his friend. From his childhood, they were good friends. That is how he wanted to help Sikandar Jah. So there is something about this Mahipatram, about whom we have not much heard. There is not much written about him. There has been no research done on the role of Mahipatram, the very first rebel against the British rule in British indirect rule in Hyderabad state. He was actually from Gujarat. He was the son of Gajapati, a Khatri chief, and as a young boy, he had good training in military and all that. He was a very enterprising person from the beginning. So he had good military training, and he wanted to make use of it. He wanted to make a fortune. It is not for a living that he came to Hyderabad. He wanted to make a fortune. He wanted to climb the career of his own military career. He was basically a military man, later on got into administration and all. But he came to Hyderabad via Mysore. He went to Mysore, where Hyder Ali was the ruler. He served under him for a while. He was not satisfied with the position that was accorded to him. Later on, he moved to Hyderabad along with his brother Sripatram. Sripatram also had a role to play in the later part of his career life. So when he came to Hyderabad, already there was Raymond force, French force was there, brought out by Nizam Ali, and he became a Peshkar under Raymond. Peshkar was a big post, that too for the French army that was recruited by Raymond with the blessings of the Nizam. He was holding a very important post as a Peshkar. But as you know, he was there only for a short time, 1798 after his death. This Piran was appointed, and Piran also was removed from power. The entire Raymond force was wound up under the influence of the British. So when French force was disbanded, there was a small revolt against the Nizam, against the British. And in that particular French revolt against the British, Mahipatram actually supported the cause of the British, and he was able to revolts, French soldiers' revolt. And that was the position in the initial stages. But later on, after Raymond's force was disbanded, he was very close to the Sikandar Jah. In 1803, he became he was only a prince at that time. Later on, when Sikandar Jah became the Nizam, he was drawn very close to him. So here at this particular stage, there was a big tussle between the Nizam administration and the British. By then, there was a subsidiary alliance which has come into being, and they wanted to interfere in the internal affairs of the Hyderabad state, which was resented to by the supporters of the Nizam. Nizam could not raise any hand against it, but supporters of the Nizam, they were able to see a hidden agenda for the British in interfering in the internal affairs. That is why the protest was basically was resented too. They wanted protection from the British, not their interference, not their authority. You just find the idea of the opposers of the British. They wanted protection from, because the armies were disbanded after Leslie's subsidiary alliance. They never wanted British interference, appointing their own people as the residents here, who acted as the ears and eyes for the British. This was not to the liking of the common Hyderabad, the residents or nobles, or even the family of the Nizam. But the Nizam did not, as I was telling repeatedly, Nizam did not raise any hue and cry because he was controlled by these alliances, etc. So thus you find Mahipatram was the first person to oppose the unnecessary interference of the British in Hyderabad state. He wanted to be freed from the British control, and by abjuring all the earlier alliances. At this time, there was Barlow, the viceroy. He wrote to the home government. See, Hyderabad the nobles are trying to abjure the alliance which was earlier signed. And he cautioned, he wanted to he wanted to interfere in the affairs of this state as against Cornwallis system of non-interference. Here, to the students of Indian history, I would like to recall as to how there was divergent opinions. Earlier, as long as it was possible not to interfere in the internal affairs of the native states, the people were asked to keep themselves away from it. That is how Cornwallis never wanted to interfere in the internal affairs. Whereas as against this, here was Barlow, George Barlow, who wanted to interfere whenever, wherever that is possible. So this was thoroughly aghast, and he justified his stand also like this. If Hyderabad goes away from the British control, then I can give assurance that the entire country will go against the British. We will not have any control on any part of India. It is what he has written to the home government. So here the mind of the British is very clear in the letter that was written by George Barlow pertaining to Hyderabad state. If Hyderabad goes away from our alliances, etc., nothing would remain in India. Everything will go away. That is why there is a very need for our interfering in the internal affairs of Hyderabad state. We just imagine what kind of foreign policy they were adopting throughout into Hyderabad state. It was in this juncture that Mahipatram was seen with suspicion. So here is a person a Gujarati settled in Hyderabad, moving very closely with Nizam, and he is poisoning his ears by inducting anti-British sentiments. So this chap should not be allowed to come up in life in his career. That was his idea. So Sydenham, the then resident also, he was only a tool in the hands of the Governor General, and he was trying to convince Sikandar Jah to remove him from power. So at this period of time, it was Mir Alam who was the Prime Minister, who was the Diwan. Mir Alam was in very good books of the Governor General as well as the resident. That is how he became an arch rival to Mahibad Ram. Mahibad Ram was to be, Sikandar Jah wanted him to come up in life. That is why he appointed him. If Mahibad Ram is there in his court, there is a very likelihood that his influences the Nizam. It is better that he is sent away, he thought. And Sydenham suggested that he be transferred, he be sent away to Berar as the governor, as the administrator of Berar, almost like a governor. So he was sent in the year 1805. Though he went away from Hyderabad, he was not happy, even as being the governor, the administrator of Berar. He was interfering with the affairs. He was constantly telling the Nizam to oppose the British rule. So even in Berar, from Berar, he had emissaries coming and influencing the working of the Nizam. That is why Governor General, along with Mir Alam, the Prime Minister, the Diwan, they conspired against Mahibad Ram, and Mahibad Ram was summarily removed from Berar governorship. And he was, when he was made to go away from Berar, they thought that the trouble would be over. So removing him from the Diwanship of Berar, it was nothing but an insult on the part of the British, and he took it very seriously. So he has gone away, but he went from Berar, but not single. He took all his army. He had an army of 2,000 people, very loyal people under his control. The entire 2,000 people have accompanied him, and he crossed over Hyderabad, and within the Hyderabad dominion, there was one Shorapur, an independent state. Independent in the sense it was a small pocket. It had an administrator. There he has gone and took shelter in that Shorapur region. So to make the entire story short, this Mahibad Ram, after reaching that Shorapur, he aligned with the ruler there, and he made some changes, and he was able to economically he was able to prosper because of the local ruler. Pid Nayak was the local ruler. And then these details are all very interesting. But because of the constraint of the time, I'm just giving the gist of it. I'll cut it short because there are some more revolts against the British, which I would like to share with you. So Mahibad Ram, after going to Shorapur, he rose in revolt, and he declared openly his hostility toward the British, and Nizam was made to send his troops against Mahibad Ram. There was Gordon, Mr. Gordon was there. Before Gordon, General Gordon, there was one Palmer, and you all know about this infamous Palmer who started that Palmer and Co. And then it became so notorious that he wanted to swindle the entire amount from the treasury of the Nizam later on. And his daughter was married to the famous novelist Taylor, Meadows Taylor, and Meadows Taylor has written the entire episode. He is very graphical because he was a writer, he was a novelist, and we get a lot of information about Mahibad Ram's revolt through the writings of Meadows Taylor, the famous novelist who wrote on Sita, Confessions of a Thug, and The Story of My Life. These are all very well-known novels which he has written, Meadows Taylor. So that way he rose in revolt, and the Palmer's diplomacy did not function, did not work. Later on, one Major Gordon was sent in order to capture Mahibad Ram. I tell you, this battle on May 5th, 1808, a famous battle at Shorapur was fought, wherein Mahibad Ram showed all his diplomacy, his fighting spirits, and his loyal army of 2,000. They fought against the British army under Gordon, and he was defeated. His armies were defeated, to tell you. His armies were defeated. And crestfallen, this Gordon, he was riding, he was very close to Mahipatram, who has won the battle. And Mahipatram, in a fit of rage, he went personally, he took his sword and he killed him on the battlefield. Gordon was killed on the battlefield. Gordon, whose armies were already defeated, was killed. It's an extreme step. You can just imagine how much animosity he had towards the British and the British mechanizations in Hyderabad state. So later on, see, another Montisar was sent in order to capture him. And though he has won the battle against the British with his own armies, of course, with the candid support of the Nizam, the heart of hearts, he was very happy that Gordon was killed. But outwardly, he has to be supporting the British. So that way, Mahipatram, later on, he has to face a lot of difficulties because though he has won the battle, though he has killed Gordon, the British had the upper hand because of the numerous army men they had, and also the Nizam's army was his own army. So that way, he was made to leave the territory of Hyderabad. Later on, he went to Holkar. He was in the court of Holkar for some time. Later on, he had some differences and he suddenly died. Though we do not know much about Mahipatram's life later, he could not come back. See, this episode of Mahipatram clearly shows that everything was not rosy, everything was not well as the British were trying to make us imagine. There were certain responsible people, even in the court of Nizam, who were against the British, alliances with the British. The position to which the Nizam was reduced was not to the liking of such people, and Mahipatram's revolt speaks eloquently about it. I will stop with Mahipatram's revolt there. And it is for you to draw conclusions out of it. The next one against the British in Hyderabad state was in 1827. This was, it was a kind of mutiny, we can say. And never we have heard about the Nizam's troops rising against the British in such a violent way till the 1827 incident has happened. This happened in Mominabad, the present Maharashtra, Marathwada region. So here what happened was, Nizam's army was one of the vast armies in the country. It was one of the best armies, particularly the cavalry. Nizam cavalry was considered to be the flower of the entire army. And he gave a lot of importance for cavalry. In the army, you find that there were Afghans, Pathans, Dakkanis, apart from Hindus. Whereas cavalry was mostly manned by the Muslims. Muslims alone manned the cavalry. The 3rd Cavalry particularly was considered to be very efficient. And even during the period of World War, you find they played a very key role, Nizam's cavalry, Nizam's army. So I'm not going into the statistics. It was a huge, big army. And when 1800, when Wellesley signed this agreement, when the Nizam signed with the British subsidiary alliance, it was reduced to about 10,000, from 35,000 to that of 10,000. And this army was paid by the Nizam, as you know, and for that only he has given away the ceded districts also. The salaries were paid by the British, but they were trained, they were disciplined, they were clothed, and they were done everything on the British lines. For the namesake, it was Nizam's army, but in reality, it was the British army. And their discipline was imposed. The indigenous discipline which they were addicted to was discouraged. And in the name of uniformity, you find there were a number of changes, additions, commissions, omissions which were introduced by them. In 1811, Russell, when he was the president, he introduced he established a separate contingent. It was Russell's Brigade, it was called. And it was known for its discipline, its training, and it was a very strong instrument of warfare. He reorganized it so thoroughly. So it was this brigade, Russell Brigade, was responsible for quelling the rebellion of Mubarak-ud-Dawla also at 1815, when there was a revolt of Mubarak-ud-Dawla against his own brother, Nasir-ud-Dawla. There was the British contingent which went, and then it was able to quell it. That was Russell's Brigade. So later on also you find such brigades were very famous, and in the name of discipline, they introduced new reforms. One was, I'm talking about only one particular one because that is relevant to our talk today. The Muslims they, according to the religious custom, they used to grow beards, mustache beards and all that. Not mustache, beard wearing was a part of the religious ritual. This was opposed by the British. See, in the name of uniformity. At Mominabad, the commandant, he issued a circular that all the Muslim Sipahs, they should not sport their beards. They should shave off. They should shave off their beards. And as a mark of, to introduce this, in order to implement this order, you find one Colonel Davis was his next in command. He ordered two people on the parade ground. He asked two people to undergo this. A barber was summoned, and in the presence of others, these two people were made to shave off their beards. And he instructed everyone else that next day when you are coming, you should come without beards. That was the rule applied, rule imposed by the Captain Davis. This was the commandant has issued the orders, and he wanted to implement it in a very strict and loyal way. So the next day they could not tolerate this. The next day, instead of shaving off their beards, they came to the parade with a resolution, with a strong resolve to attack the commandant, the British commander, who was imposing this kind of unnecessary rule, which was interfering with the religious customs of the people. They were very much peeved because it was allowed according to the religious customs, according to the Islamic customs. So next day when he came with a violent face in order to punish these people, on the parade ground, in the open daylight, he was shot from a very close range. He was killed. When he fell to the ground, all other Sipahs, they surrounded him, and he was cut into several pieces. Not one or two, several pieces. His body was cut into several pieces. And when this was, it was taking place, immediately other British officers, etc., they came surrounded, and many of them were killed there. Many of the Sipahs who were responsible for this killing of Davis, they were shot dead, and many others were captured. They were taken as prisoners. Later on, the court-martial was held, and very severe punishments were given for them and all. So this particular act of rebellion against the British for interfering with the religious custom it sent shockwaves among the British officers, British contingents elsewhere also. This was a very major mutiny which occurred in Hyderabad state against the British. Next one, Sudharani Garu, you just remind me as to how much time I can take.
Sir, 10 more minutes, 10 or 20 minutes. As per your topic, sir, how much you have covered?
Because I don't want to cut into the time of the next speaker. You can stop me anywhere. You can stop me anywhere. Otherwise, I'm afraid I may go on for hours together.
No, sir. 10 to 15 minutes, sir. 10 to 15.
Two more very major incidents.
10 minutes more, sir.
Hello.
So, sir, anyway, it's very interesting, sir. You can take 10 to 15 to 20 minutes. You can wind up in 15.
Very good. Thank you, Chakrapani Garu, for you have come to my rescue.
Thank you, sir.
Because
Please go on, sir.
She is very strict, and she wanted to cut down by 10 minutes. You have given
no, sir. No, sir. I was also talking 10 to 15. No, sir. 10 15.
Anyway, it's webinar, sir. We can have our own time.
Exceed our time also. No problem.
Yeah, no issues, sir.
Then I thank you for your liberality. Then another incident is very important. It has attracted the all India attention even in those days. This happened in 1839. There was Wahhabi movement. I'm not going into the details of the intricacies of the Wahhabi movement, how it spread, how it came to India, but they wanted Wahhabi movement was much against the British rule in India. It was for social reform even among the Muslims, but much more than that, they wanted to oppose the British. They wanted to call upon Indian rulers, both Hindu, Muslim rulers, to oppose the British tooth and nail so that they can be sent away with bag and baggage. In those days itself, by 1839 itself, not even 1857, by 1830-35, in Hyderabad, the Nizam's own brother, that is Sikandar Jah's second son, this was Mubarak-ud-Dawla, Nasir-ud-Dawla's younger brother. He was a very interesting person. I tell you, if there is time for you, you must go through this interesting person. You know about only the 7 Nizams who ruled the state, Hyderabad. Not much is known about the person who did not rule, but he ruled the minds of the people in those days against the British rule. That was Mubarak-ud-Dawla. I have very great appreciation for this Mubarak-ud-Dawla. I have written extensively. It has come in popular papers like Hindu also. And apart from it, it was my presidential address in Warangal when the Telangana History Congress took place a few years ago. This Mubarak-ud-Dawla, he was, from the beginning, he was opposed to the British. So I tell you an example, a funny example. Once his father told him, I will appoint one British soldier at your gate. He had a palace of his own, right from his beginning, from the beginning. As a child, he had a palace of his own. He had a lot of income. He had a private army of 1 lakh. And his father suggested, can I appoint one? I want to appoint one British soldier at your gate. He said, see, I can as well die rather than allowing a British soldier at my palace gate. That is what the young fellow replied. You can just imagine how much opposed he was against the British. Very presence of the British in Hyderabad, he was opposed. So this young man, he was born in 1800. In 1815, he had the first great struggle with the British. The first brain was in 18 when he was hardly 15 years of age. Very interesting story is there. He had a servant who went to a tailor. The tailor was appointed by the resident. He was serving the British resident Koti. And this servant went and picked up a quarrel with that tailor. And this resulted in the British, he came and took shelter in his palace, Mubarak's palace. So the army, Russell's brigade came, and then they wanted to chase him. So there was a big fight between the British armies and his private army, Mubarak's army. At the age of 15, he was just hardly 15 years. So in the struggle, one British soldier was killed in that struggle. So later on, the prime minister, he interfered, and then he was able to bring down the entire thing. The peace was restored, and he was prevailed upon. The Nizam was prevailed upon to send this boy away to Golconda Fort, where it was almost like a prison. So he has to spend 5 years of his early life in Golconda prison for the fault that he has made by giving shelter to a servant who quarreled with a tailor who was appointed by the British. It was a struggle between British on one side and the Prince Mubarak-ud-Dawla. That is how he started. From the beginning, he had no good opinion about the British, no love lost between the two. Later on, when the Wahhabi movement was spreading, he was the first person to plunge into this struggle. He wanted to support Wahhabi movement against the British. Basically, we know Wahhabis, they were opposed to the British. And he had a very good, very excellent system of spy system. He had nearly 46 first grade spies who were recruited by him in those days. You can just imagine what kind of a spy system he was able to maintain in order to send messages, to receive messages from almost all the rulers in India, from Rampur to Tonk to several other, from Bombay to Kanyakumari, from south. Every private, every nobleman was associated with this Wahhabi movement, and the money was supplied by him because he had access to enormous wealth. And as I told you, he also had his own armies. And the most important among his followers was the Kurnool Nawab, Rasul Khan. Rasul Khan also was anti-British, and they belonged to the same age group. So there was very good understanding, friendship between the two, and secretly they exchanged letters through spies, enormous spies. And he used to pay even 100 rupees for the spies per month. From 12 rupees to 100 rupees, the salaries were paid according to the services rendered by these spies. A very excellent system of spy system was evolved by him. I tell you, they used to carry letters in the folds of their turban. They used to wear silver bangles. the silver bangles in one particular fashion in order to communicate that they were the spies of Mubarak. And they used to wear talisman. Talisman, as you know, see for spiritual leaders will give, and they will wear armlets as it is called. They will wear armlets, but they are not armlets. Actually, inside the armlets, letters will be there. So letters, messages were carried in an ingenious way by these people, by the spies. And Colonel Rasul Khan, when he came under his spell, he was instructed by Mubarak that money is no problem. I will give you any amount of money. But the only thing is Rasul Khan has to make arms and ammunition. Their idea was that it will be distributed among the youth who are opposed to the British rule, and a big revolution will come. Or one fine morning, they will join together, and Shah of Persia will come to their rescue, to their help. And with the help of Shah of Persia, they will revolt against the British and defeat them, send them away back to with their bag and baggage. That is how they planned. Rasul Khan prepared a huge stock of arms, ammunition, and the underground halls were in his own palace in Rani Bagh. There were a number of underground rooms which were meant for this. They manufactured, an arsenal was established. He manufactured arms, ammunition, gunpowder, etc. They were all stored. And on one fine morning, he will be coming. That is how he sent a letter also. One very crucial letter in which he has spelled out his plan was, it fell into the hands of the British spies. I will tell you that a small incident as to how it fell. The messenger carrying this particular letter, the letter had a very important message. When everything is ready, when all the arms and ammunitions are all made, prepared, and when it is ready, I will personally come to you, come to Kurnool, and both of you will join, and we'll declare a war against the British with the help of our other princely states in India who are our friends. That is how he has written a letter. This letter was carried by a spy, and on the way, when he was riding, he has to take a night rest. And in the Sarai, where he was resting, there was suspicion that British spies were already on the hunt. They may even find out. So what he did, he was carrying this message in an armlet to the tied to his arm, and he removed it. There was an old beggar woman who was there in the Sarai, and he tied it to her hand, so that next day morning when he is proceeding his journey to Kurnool, he can collect that and go. Suppose some British spies come, see, they will not suspect that old lady, whereas even if he is examined, nothing will happen. They cannot find the letter. That is how he tied it to the old woman. But unfortunately, when the British spies came on a sentry, on security, they saw this armlet, and that lady was not wearing the previous day. They had a suspicion, and they caught it. When they opened, this was the content. I will be coming to Kurnool. Both of us will join. Our armies will defeat the British. This is how he has written in the letter. When this was found, they had a suspicion that Mubarak is having in league with other princes. So immediately find a commission was appointed with 6 members, 3 from British side and 3 from Nizam side. And all the details are not tested now at the present. And the commission of inquiry revealed that he was in close alliance with the Kurnool Nawab, Rasul Khan. Immediately, armies were sent from Madras, from Bellary and Madras. They went, they attacked Kurnool. He was captured, he was defeated, he was captured, he was sent to Madras, from there to Trichinopalli. There, he in the prison of Trichinopalli, suddenly he died. And the person who killed him was his own servant. And when he was asked, the servant told, so this man, Rasul Khan, he started going to a church, it's in the Trichinopalli fort. And I don't like Muslims getting converted into Christianity. That is why I killed him. But anyway, this was not the real truth. There are a number of theories, versions as to how and in what manner he died. It is not clearly known whether the British were themselves were responsible for the killing of the death of Rasul Khan. Or anyway, that servant was hanged, and his body was sent back to Kurnool. And Kurnool was taken over by the British, and it was made into a regulatory branch. But here, as far as Mubariz-ud-Dawla was concerned in Hyderabad, his role in Wahhabi movement, his role against the British was very clear, and he was sent to the Golconda prison again. And he was never to come back. In 1854, when he was just 54 years of age, he passed away. He died and he was just 54 years, 3 years even before his brother, that was Nasir-ud-Dawla died. Nasir-ud-Dawla died in 1857. So this is a very clear indication as to how in Hyderabad, the people like even nobles, like Mubariz-ud-Dawla, they were dead against the alliances, they were dead against the British role in the affairs of Hyderabad state. But one more thing I would like to recall to your mind, this is much more bigger than all these three, and that happened in 1855, 2 years before the so-called first war of independence has happened at all India level, before the Meerut revolt took place in May 10th, 1827. Even 2 years before that, in Hyderabad, there was a mutiny on the same scale as that of Meerut revolt. This happened in Bolaram. That is why we call it as mutiny at Bolaram. I was telling you about the importance of Nizam's cavalry, Nizam's army. It was one of the finest in those days. And Nizam's cavalry was having several posts. One was Bolaram, which was the main one. And apart from it, in Marathwada, Hangoli, was another one. Right? That's 7 or 8 stations were there. But the most important one was in Bolaram. See, in 1855, in the month of September, this revolt has taken place during the month of Muharram. The person who was the commander, general officer's command, that was Major General Colin Mackenzie. He was the army officer, and he was almost killed in that mutiny. People thought that he was actually killed, but somehow he survived. And later on, he was to come back to India to serve for some more years in an ignominious way. It's a very interesting incident. The entire episode is very interesting. This Mackenzie was a seasoned British officer. He was a Scottish person. He joined at the age of 19, he came to India, joined Madras Regiment. And later on, he rose in very quick succession to the higher positions. When he was early 20s, he was sent to Afghanistan. He participated in the first Afghan war. At that time, there was Russophobia. There was the fear of Russia invading Afghanistan. That is why British took the situation very seriously, and the first Afghan war was fought. When he went to Afghanistan, he acted in such a manner that the Afghans called him as the English mullah. He used to wear their dress, Afghan dress, and he played a very key role in capturing some of the territories, some of the posts there. And after that, he participated in the Sikh War, second Sikh War. And that way, he was a seasoned soldier. He was picked up by none else than Dalhousie, the Governor General, and he appointed him as the Commander-in-Chief or Commandant-Chief for the Bolaram cavalry, of the Nizam's cavalry. That is how in 1854 he had come. This happened next year. Normally, the Shias, they celebrate for 10 days Muharram festival. On the last day, they take a long procession, big procession as they call it, big procession. And with that, the entire Muharram festival comes to an end. All these 10 days, they are given holidays, leave. They are given leave because they have to go fast and they will be spending fasts on these 10 days. Last day, it will be a procession. So this procession fell on 23rd September, the big procession. So 23rd September, it was Sabbath day for the commandant. He's a Christian and he had a lot of Christian friends. Soldiers were Christians. 84 officers were there, British officers were there in the cavalry. Though about 10,000 native sepoys were there, there were such a big number of British commandants. So he objected to it. It cannot be on 23rd. You make it as 26th or 27th, whatever. Not on Sunday. Sunday is church day. For him, it is very sacred. Whereas these people pleaded, see, the 10th day, the procession has to take place according to the religious custom. And you cannot alter it just because it happens to be Sunday. It cannot be held on some other day. They were very keen, they were very clear that it has to be held only on 23rd. So he grew wild, and then he on protest and representations, etc., he made a small amendment. All right, you can have the procession, but elsewhere, not on the main streets, where these people are all living. The commandant lives on the street, and other officers, British officers also there. That street has to be avoided. You can take the procession on other lanes, by lanes, not on the thoroughfare. That is how he amended, and then he said, this is the final one. See, on 20th, he gave this order. He gave the order without considering their religious sentiments, because Muharram cannot be celebrated according to the wishes of Tom, Dick, Harry, Mary. It has to be celebrated according to the religious custom of which has been well established. That is what they have taken the stand. Their stand was very firm. It cannot be altered. But he said, you take the procession, but not on this road. So on 21st, next day, 20th, he ordered this, and 21st evening, he was spending his time in the garden in his own quarters. Several his close friends have come. They were all chit-chatting and all. Immediately, the procession has come, a small protest procession. This is not Muharram procession, but this is a protest against the commandant. And they came, then they were shouting. And he sent his Hindu servant to go and stop that procession and ask them to get back to their barracks. So when he went, they did not listen to it. See, what is it? Is it his father's road? How can the commander ask us not to go? It is not his property. It is a common road. It is a public road. So then he went personally without he never had any arms with him. And single-handed he went and then accosted them. He stopped them by waving his hand, and he spoke to them in a very harsh way. See, in spite of my orders, how can you defy my orders? You get back fully, and this is not to be allowed. That is how he shouted at them. And in the great melee, there was a struggle between the two, and one of the Sipais there, cavalryman, he hit him with his sword. So he was badly wounded. There were a number of blows on the commander, Colin Mackenzie, and shouting, howling, crying, with blood oozing out, gushing out from his wounds. He came back to his gate. He entered the gate. And even then, he was chased by the armymen, the cavalrymen. They started shouting and hitting him. And he went inside, and his wife, Helen bolted the door. In spite of it, they started banging. They destroyed all the furniture in the veranda and all. All other, his friends, they were also afraid. And many of them were also wounded by the mob, by this restless mob. That is how he went inside, and they do not know what has happened. From the back side of the house, one servant came, and by symbol, by signs, he said, Colin Mackenzie is no more. That is how he signed in order to disperse them. So with that, they were very happy, and they went away shouting happily, celebrating the entire move. But inside, what happened was she dressed his wounds, and then doctor was summoned, and he was able to get. He did not die. Fortunately, he did not die. But over this incident, you find the resident Bushway. Bushway was the then resident. He sent a message to the Governor General. Dalhousie appointed a commission. This is very interesting for the students of Indian history. The commission which was appointed by Dalhousie, it went into the details, it inquired everything, they made inquiries, and they took 3 months' time in order to bring out a report. The report is very interesting. They said, he invited trouble. That is what they found fault with Mackenzie. It was his doing, his own doing, and he should not have interfered with the religious affairs. And moreover, the procession ought to have taken place on Sunday. How can he order not to take place, not to conduct it on Sunday? That is very, very bad on his part. And hereafter, he gives a interesting, some of them were punished, some of them were put in prison, and some of them were killed also, those who participated in the opposition to the Colin Mackenzie. This, the content of this report of Governor General was not meant only for the commandant at Hyderabad. It was meant for the entire British contingents all over the country, all over India. So it shows how significant this Polaram revolt was. There he made one or two things are very important for us. he said, unless it is warranted, we should try to, British officers should not interfere in the religious affairs of the natives, whether it is Hinduism or Buddhism or Jainism or Islamic. We should not interfere. That was to be followed by Dalhousie. And see, there are a number of other recommendations. And ironically, the same person, he says, if such incidents occur in other places, it will be very difficult for us to put native states under our check, native states under our control. That is what he has said. Ironically, you find the same Dalhousie was responsible for the mutiny, the Sipahi mutiny, which occurred 2 years later, because most of the things were his doing. You see, it was Dalhousie who was responsible for many of the things which propelled opposition to the British. So that 1855 revolt is also very significant. That has happened much before, 2 years before the Sipahi mutiny. And then in order to give a proper shelter, to give a good residence for the commandant, cavalry commandant, you find Nizam immediately ordered a big, huge bungalow worthy to be the house for the commandant was ordered. It was built, and it is now standing as the southern sojourn for the President of India. The southern sojourn is that building was 90 acres area was chosen, and there he built. He took 6 years for it to be built, and later on with an underground cellar for the connecting kitchen with the dining room. Also, even now we go to see that in Bolaram, that particular Rashtrapati Nilayam, and that was originally built for the British commander because he was exposed to the mob, to the cavalry Sipahis. That is why he was wounded, and a new building was built, and there they remained. They lived for the rest of it. In 1948, September 17th, which Professor Chakrapani referred, the last day of the end of Nizam's rule, the surrender of the Nizam's armies took place in the courtyard of that particular building. The building which was meant for Colin Mackenzie, or the commandant of the cavalry. So it was their Azamza, the elder son of the Nizam, was the honorary commander for the Nizam's forces. He formally surrendered by signing the instrument of surrender before General Chaudhary. So that way, it is also seen in history. This 1855 Bolaram mutiny has not been much worked on. See, to tell you, we as the present day students of history, we should try to see how anti-British sentiments have been there, even in Hyderabad. It may not be in the name of, under the nomenclature, independence movement, but I tell you, they were the nurseries from which the independence struggle must have come later. See, suddenly independence struggle cannot take place at a higher altitude. There were some of these early revolts. They prepared people mentally towards that end. So credit should be given for such lesser known incidents like Mominabad revolt, Mominabad mutiny, Mahibat Ram's revolt. Unmindful of his own safety, this Mahibat Ram rose against the British. Single-handedly, he went to the extent of even killing a British commander when the British were so much feared by the native rulers. And he had that audacity. You can just imagine, it was nothing but you may not call it as independence movement. It is much more than that. According to me, it is much more than that. People got inspiration from such acts of commission and omission. And similarly, Mubarak-ud-Dawla, an unsung hero. He was the mistake that he did was that he was the second brother for second son of his father. Had he been the first son of his father instead of Nasir-ud-Dawla, I think history of Hyderabad would have been totally different. He would not have been cowed down by the British. Nasir-ud-Dawla was good for nothing. He was a rubber seal. Whereas his younger brother, though he was much younger than the ruler, he had that capacity, he had that idea to remove once for all, to send the British away. He had a very good Raisul Musalman was the title that he assumed himself. And his plans were very ingenious. Of course, they did not fructify. They wanted to invite Shah of Russia because he was opposed to the British. and Persian Shah, he will be the suzerain caliph of the entire Muslim world, and he will appoint him as the representative of India. He said he will rule India against the British. He will remove the British rule from India. This is how he had his ambition. Of course, they were not practically grounded, but still, such kind of ideas, such kind of motivating spirit that such movements, they gave an ideological stimulus for the movements which came later. So previous to 1857, there were revolts, though you may not call them as a freedom struggle, etc., but they provided ideological significance, ideological background, and they conditioned the path, they conditioned the ideological framework for the movements to come later. So to that extent, you should give importance for the early anti-British revolts, as it happened all over the country, as it happened even in South India, in many parts of South India. In Hyderabad also it happened, and we should not ignore them. My message to my young research scholars is that they should ponder over on this untrekked path. And there are a number of such issues which you should try to highlight, you should try to bring out by your research, etc. I stop here because I am already, as Chakrapani Garu has given me 20 minutes time, I think I have, I don't think I have exceeded. I wanted to be a student. So thank you so much.
Sir, thank you very much. It's a very, very wonderful narration. And I feel, at least for me, I'm first time, hearing all these news stories, like, whether it is Mahipati Ram or, Moinuddaulah or, the revolt of Bolaram. I wanted to see that building, now. I mean, today or tomorrow, I would like to visit. That intensity, in your narration, sir. Thank you very much. I think we need a series on Hyderabad revolts. Hyderabad revolts against British. I think we can, I'll discuss with Professor Sudharani Garu and my history department, and we'll keep it in our archives, how it happened, what we feel, because, for me, I have a big complaint against History Congress. They never noticed, these kind of revolts and, this kind of historical process of freedom fight. We heard about, Sarojini Naidu's father's contribution, Agurnath Chattopadhyay's activities against British and all that. But in early days, these many, even Muslim or Hindu or whoever it so may be, they are against British in principle. You really brought it in very, very interesting way. Thank you very much, sir. All the way for joining, from very far off, almost 700 kilometers, 400 or 700 kilometers away. Almost your border to my neighboring state, not even Telangana state, even other end of Andhra Pradesh. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. We'll definitely will come back to you. And before that, I request Sudharani Garu to, give her remarks on this on this presentation.
Thank you, Chakrapani. Along with you, I was really thrilled to, again, it's a journey of history. From the past to the present, and very well narrated by Professor Seshan. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us and appraising our young scholars about the early revolts of the 1850, right from the 1776 to the conditions, how the first revolt of Mahipat Ram, and then next is the 1827 mutiny, Moinabad, and the Bolaram revolts. And I'll cut short my comments because we are running out of time. And these are the self-respect movements I could call self-respect revolts, because the culture of Hyderabad is being maintained well by the Nizam in the earlier days. And as you well said, there were no anti-Nizam revolts, but only anti-British revolts in the first page of the before 1857. So this was well narrated by you, sir. Thank you so much for being with us. And we wanted to hear from you more. Maybe we'll record, and this it's been recorded also, and will be transcribed also, and we'll give to put it in YouTube channel also for the sake of the use of the learners. Thank you so much, and I think without losing much of the time, we'll move on to the next speaker. I think Chakrapani garu. Dean sir. Professor Chakrapani.
Yeah, already our next, again, I welcome all of you for this next speaker's session. As all of you know, our next speaker is Professor Adapa Satyanarayana garu, is a great historian of Telangana land. And he's very, of course, his contribution to the history of Telangana is immense. Not only as a teacher, as a writer also. As a writer and as a historian, he compiled, several aspects, unknown facts about Telangana's history. Sudharani madam, do we take any one or two questions, because Professor Tirumali is also maybe
we'll take both all the questions together at the end, sir.
And till that time, shall we ask our other resource person to wait?
Session, sir, if you
so why don't we take
mind.
one or two questions?
No problem. No problem.
Session, sir, is it convenient to answer now itself, sir?
Fine. I am sure it is convenient.
Yeah, sir. Because very interesting questions are raised by, not exactly question, but one comment, by Tirumali in Konda. I see he says, Hyderabad freedom movement appears to be funny. Yeah, Tirumali garu, can you briefly share your views very briefly? Please turn on your mic, sir. Technical team, please allow Tirumali garu to speak. Unmute. Technical team, please unmute. Tirumali garu, మీరు ఒకసారి unmute చేసుకోండి. Can you hear me? Sudharani madam,
యశ్వంత్కి కాల్ చేస్తున్నాను ఇప్పుడే.
Okay.
రమ్మని చెప్పండి, అన్మ్యూట్ సార్ని.
Tirumali garu, just watch on your screen. There will be stage.
సార్ మీది మైక్ ఆన్ లోనే ఉందా? అన్మ్యూట్ చేసే ఉందా తిరుమల సార్?
లేదు.
We are calling Yashwant now to address this.
Yeah, to unmute Satyanarayana garu also we need.
పిలవండి శ్రీనివాస్.
Professor Vadanam, can you please help us? Vadanam Srinivas.
సార్ నేను ట్రై చేస్తున్నా సార్, చూస్తున్నాను. యశ్వంత్ పిలుస్తున్నాను. యశ్వంత్.
Yeah, meanwhile, I request all the participants. It is not possible to come to everyone. Just you can post your questions and comments on dialogue box, or chat box. Yeah.
Yashwant is coming. Meanwhile, we can take others.
Yeah. Aruna, you posted something like similarly. Others also, I request, if you have any question, if you have any clarification from Professor Session, sir, you please post there, and we can read it, and I think we need not to waste our time. Yeah, sir. Before that, sir, we need not to stay like this. Session, sir, I have a small query. I'm very enthusiastic history reader.
Yes.
Yeah, sir. No, madam, we'll wait till that person.
Madam, Yashwant has come, sir. Already.
Yashwant
has come, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, sir. Only one small thing is, what was the
Not able to hear you, sir. Chakrapan, sir.
Or what was the, I mean, across the country, like, I mean, like mutinies and like big revolts and the freedom movement and Gandhi or, some other national, the so-called nation.
Hyderabad, even during the period of national movement. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Can you?
It is clear, sir. Yeah.
Hyderabad did play an important role because it was under the indirect control of the British. The British surveillance was much less when compared to that of the remaining parts of India. That is why number of freedom fighters, they took shelter in Hyderabad, and they had a lot of activities carried from here. During the period of freedom movement, you find you mentioned about Agornath Chattopadhyay, Sarojini Naidu. They were key players at the national level. They may be from Hyderabad, but they were not confined only to Hyderabad. They did conceive the idea of India. They had the anti-British attitude as a nation. So Hyderabad was made to be rich ground for independence movement in the non-cooperation movement, or even under civil disobedience movement. Apart from the national movements at the national level brought about by Gandhi, etc., there were unique national movements emanating from Hyderabad, like the Chanda Rail project, for example. It gave shock waves for the British, and it was confined to Hyderabad. The nuances of it were not understood by people elsewhere. But then when it reached the peak point, you find Governor Chattopadhyay himself was sent out from Hyderabad. He has to go, leaving his home, leaving his state and all. So at the national level, it made ripples. So there were such a unique, the Charka movement also, you find Hyderabad served as a unique example for the rest of the country. It is not as though they were following whatever was going on elsewhere in the country, like non-cooperation movement, civil disobedience or quit India. There were few unique movements which emanated from Hyderabad.
ఇక్కడ ఆన్ చేయట్లేదు సుధారణ మేడం బుక్స్ ఇక్కడ నుంచి సారీ సార్
So Hyderabad did serve as a even for national movement.
Yashwant is here, Chakrapani.
It's going on, right? Sir, yeah, please continue, sir.
So,
station, sir, please continue. Yes, sir.
As far as the pre-1857 revolts were concerned, they were mostly against the British presence, against their British mechanizations, against the alliances which they have brought in. Because the British occupied India in 2-3 ways. Number one was by waging wars, by alliances, by using the pen. With the stroke of the pen, they were able to occupy many of the lands. Like subsidiary alliance itself is an example. Similarly, the doctrine of lapse is another, with the stroke of the pen. So they did occupy directly as indirectly. And Hyderabad was brought under the British control due to the alliances, number one, and also by legislations. So you find the opposition to the British cannot be considered as in the real sense, though it is not as freedom struggle. It was anti-British, and from this anti-British, you find later, after 1857, you find when the national movement has taken place, even in other parts of the country, you find that this has served as an example. The heroic struggle brought about by some of the leaders here, like Mahibat Ram telling. In the army, the disgruntled army, you find they never hesitated to express their resentment against the British, their rules, regulations. And we are not much told about Mominabad revolt. We are told only about the Enfield rifle that was introduced by the British prior to 1857, which caused resentment among the Muslims as well as the Hindus, because there was a rumor that the greased cottages were responsible for it, because the grease was made out of the fat of cow and pig. So these things came later. But there have been such mutinies, revolts, even in the army in Hyderabad, which are not much known, which are not much researched.
Yes, sir.
On.
As you rightly said, sir. Yeah, we need to, in fact, we need to throw light on those kind of early revolts. I think, as I said, sir, we can record, I think, in a series, of continuous kind of thing. I think history department will take up that.
Sure, definitely.
That issue. Now I request Tirumali Garu, very brief comments, sir, because since you are there.
Generally, freedom movement, freedom struggle means the struggle of the country, entire country against the British. But individuals' movements against the British are not a freedom movement. It is to get their principality or their power back. That is the standard definition of freedom movement. So perhaps Sheshanagaru is clubbing every anti-British as a freedom movement. Freedom means the liberation of the country. And by this time, what is a country? And a country has to become a nation. Further concept of nation also did not emerge in these struggles. That is what I think. There is a lot of difference.
No. Tirumali Garu.
Yes, that is what actually standard historians.
We are very clear, and of course, Sheshan Garu also. What we are saying is early revolts.
Historians have written on freedom movement like this. Okay.
Let me.
In my initial remarks also, Sheshan sir, 1 minute. In my initial remarks also, very clearly I explained, and also our position also was that. That's why our history department, they very, clearly stated this as early revolts against British. It's not freedom movement.
Title itself.
Yeah, title is a broad, Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. We are just remembering certain early
voices of protest.
Yeah, initial revolts and against British in this first chapter. Even second is against Nizam. Thank you, Tirumali Garu. Yeah, now I think it is time to go back to our Adapa Satyanarayana Garu.
Someone else raised the Sridhar and.
Yeah, Sridhar. Sir, it is a great opportunity and privilege to listening you. I also have a query. Recent literature are of the opinion that the East India Company, London itself, introduced and harsh at their personnel, because these staff, those business is supposed to be trade, but they are involved in politics and want against their primary concern. Can you reflect upon it? I think it should be something some more clear. If Sridhar, if you are there online, quickly you can because this writing is not for me at least not clear. Can you come online, Mr. Sridhar, and
yes, sir.
Yeah, please.
I'm here.
Please ask your questions.
I'm a student of Sheshan, sir.
Oh, good. Right.
At University of Hyderabad.
Good.
Sir, I'm asking that. See, the East India Company we look at as a power. But what recent writings were telling is that they're supposed to do business here, facilitate, without informing the East India Company. They involved in politics here, and it went against their interests. Basic concern, trade. So they are not comfortable with it itself. So at the end of the day, they also shut down the East India Company also in later years. So I just wanted to, it's a just comment, not a question at all. So thank you. Thank you.
It is very nice, Sridhar. I got the essence of what you wanted. See, they came as traders. The East India Company was interested only in trade. But when they came to protect their trade, they wanted armies.
Yeah.
In order to pay the armies, they wanted money. To have money, to raise money, they wanted to levy taxes. To levy tax, they needed land. And the land territories, they will not come on a platter. In order to acquire territories, they waged wars. As I was telling, waged wars, they had alliances, and with the stroke of the pen also, they were able to conquer lands, right from Plassey. See, logically speaking, in order to thrive the trade, in order to ensure that trade, they wanted territories in India. As simple as that. They wanted armies to protect their trade. Everything was to protect their trade. That was the main purpose. All this doing politics, it was only to protect the trade. Later on, as you said, they were able to wind up the company. Company was not wound up by the company. Company was wound up by the crown. The company thought company wanted to continue. It was a startup company, as you know. The present day nomenclature could be, you can apply this to the East India Company even. It was a startup company. And the company started to rule a country. Nowhere you have heard about. Yes. And that was the sad story of it. So you are very true that trade was the main purpose. In order to protect, in order to thrive in trade, they wanted the country itself. That is how they came to rule the country.
Thank you, Session sir. Yeah, obviously, as you said, no, it is with the permission and accent of Crown only, they did all that. And companies, I mean, they influenced even the British Crown also. So that is not, they're not innocents in that way. Yeah, now we'll go to our Adapa Satyanarayana sir. Professor Satyanarayana Garu, please, I welcome as faculty of Social Sciences Dean. And also, as you know, you are part of our history department in one way or other. Definitely, I think this lecture, again, you know, as our Session sir's lecture only, this is also will be definitely throw some light, you know, some insights on happenings against Nizam. Maybe even again, Tirumali Gari kind of question, you know, into my mind, whether we call that as freedom against the Nizam struggle, is whether it is freedom or whether it is to join India or, you know, part of this. Of course, you know, all that questions will be, I think, covered in Adapa Satyanarayana Gari's.
Yes. Thank you very much, Professor Chakrapani. Yes.
Please go on, sir. Carry on, sir. Adapa Garu.
I'm not unmuting.
Yeah. No, you are unmuted. Again, you unmute yourself, sir.
Unmute change, sir, Miru.
Just now, okay?
All right, done.
Okay. So again, once again, I thank you all for giving me this opportunity to share some of my views. Of course, Professor Session has, in fact, laid the ground for my exposition in terms of the anti-British feeling that was growing in the Hyderabad state. While I'll be focusing on the 1857 and the post-1857 developments, some broad trends, and also some interpretation in the light of the new research that that's being going on. One thing is, as Tirumali said, the idea of nation, the idea of freedom was not there, explicitly, so to speak, but there was an underlying current that amongst the people of Hyderabad state, people, I mean, all sections of the people, there was this growing resentment against the British as well as the Nizam, because they perceive. I mean, I'll demonstrate it. 1857 revolt and other. They in fact perceived both Nizam and the British as anti-people. Now we all know that 1857, Turabas Khan's revolt was significant in laying foundations for what I call secular nationalism in Hyderabad. So I'm of the view, the essential feature of the Hyderabad freedom struggle is that it premised, it was based on non-religious, non-ethnic, non-conventional. It was broadly a cosmopolitan expression, cutting across caste, tribe, gender, and presenting a consciousness which is inherently secular. For example, when I'm doing research on 1857, very few of us, in fact, including me, did not think as to how Turabas Khan's revolt inspired the other sections of the Telangana society, for that matter, Hyderabad society, in revolting. In Turabas Khan's revolt, of course, when he led this procession, when he occupied the houses in front of the presidency, there was no resistance. The so-called Hindus were in majority, and the houses which he occupied belonged to the Hindus, but they never objected. Okay, they facilitated his attack on the building, on the residence building. So therefore, they in fact vacated, and that shows that there was something which has been there in their understanding. Actually, the Hindu and the Muslim, the categories that we today talk about, are not the categories that people themselves employed in the 1857 revolt itself. In fact, more than session, I would say that the pre-57 scenario suggests as a revolt of the, let us say, the entrenched, feudal regional elite. Though they had explicitly, displayed their resentment of the British. But during the post-1857, in 1857, post-1857, what is really interesting is that there was a great amount of solidarity amongst these communities. And we as a people, not the way that we define today's sense of nationalism, but there was this feeling. So Turabas Khan, he revolted against the British because of the way in which they mistreated. I mean, it was basically a military discipline, a kind of a service matter that that prompted him to revolt. But beyond that, what it signified was that the intensity of the anti-British feeling that submerged in the Telangana society. In fact, while writing my recent book on Telangana history, I found out from the British records, the opinions that they expressed, I think they are not properly recorded. The British officers were aghast at the fact that there was so much of unity between the so-called Hindus and the Muslims, and they felt that it was a dangerous movement. The Turabas Khan represented a trend, which in fact was a dangerous trend, they thought. And they could not dismiss Turabas Khan's uprising as just an individual's thing. Underlying that, as Session Sir has already enlightened us, there was this great turmoil at different levels, and therefore that got expressed in a form in 1857 in terms of this attack on British presidency. Secondly, the British presidency attack cannot be seen in isolation. It has to be seen in conjunction with the subsequent developments. What happened after Tarabas comes, reply and execution, preparation and execution, and all that. What happened was that was significant. That's what I come to Thirumali's point. From about 1860s to 1870s and 1880s, for the 22, 25 years after the Sipai movement was crushed, what Hyderabad state witnessed, including the part of Telangana, was this subaltern groups resisting both the feudal autocratic regime of Nizam and the British. That was clearly seen in the uprising of Ramji Gond. You see, one sharp distinction I draw between the pre-87 revolts and the post-87 revolt is that pre-87 revolts are basically, let us say, elite-centered, as Thirumali was telling, that the principalities, the local elites, who wanted to recover, their own position, so to speak, and therefore they waged against the British. But the post-57 is a mass people's uprising. Ramji Gond, when he revolted against the British, he, along with him, his army, so to speak, consisted of the Rohillas, the disgruntled, elements, so to speak, within the so-called Muslim community, and from the civil society also there were Muslims, there were tribes, there were peasants, and in that region of Nirmal and Adilabad, this whole component of the common people, of the subalterns, was in fact manifested in Ramji Gond's revolt. So Ramji Gond revolt again was not simply a Gond revolt, a tribal revolt. No, I think we have to sort of revise our view and see that as a kind of a uprising from below, so to speak. This was not the kind of uprising that we see during the pre-1857 period. So it was an uprising of the people from below, of the subaltern, against the grievances. They may be individual centric, but it's more than individual. It is the communitarian. So therefore, first of all, one major departure that I found was that post 1857 revolt, where you see the signs of an alliance between different segments of the Hyderabad society, tribes, non-tribes, peasants, non-peasants, Hindus, Muslims, and so on and so forth. So therefore, that is I think the beginning of secular nationalism in Hyderabad. The seeds of that were sown in 1857 itself. That's what I maintain. The second important factor that we have to see is the second half of the 19th century. Of course, as compared to the British India, of course, the intensity of the movement was low. But as Sheshan hinted, that the Chanda Railway scheme was, in fact, is an articulation of the elite, of the urban elite, so to speak, Aghona Chattopadhyaya. But along with Aghona Chattopadhyaya, who are his colleagues? They were Mullah Abdul Qayyum, Dastagir Haushangi, and a host of others. Again, I see a kind of a broad-based, anti-British, anti-Nizam, alliance taking place. The so-called Hindus and Muslims coming together against the autocratic regime of the Nizam. So that was the foundation on which the nationalist struggle was based as far as Hyderabad state is concerned. It's not, I don't want to compare, the scenario in the coastal Andhra and under the Madras presidency, but I would argue that in Hyderabad, the cosmopolitan character of this articulation of the autocratic Nizam as well as the British is very much grounded, and that was to continue in the 20th century more as the movement began to expand, as the social basis of the anti-Nizam, anti-British began to expand. Those features were very much present, though it was restricted. When the International Congress was founded, when within Hyderabad, the first early nationalists happened to be the so-called Muslims, like Mullah Abdul Qayyum and others. They were clearly nationalistic in the sense of anti-British and also anti-autocracy. Some of them were holding high positions. In spite of that, their cause was very much in conjunction with the nationalist uprising that is taking place outside the Hyderabad state. I mean, I should see there is interconnection, between Hyderabad state and the British India. Hyderabad has never been alone, has been isolated. No, it's not true. Just as during the time of the Qutub Shahis, that how the foreign elements, foreign cultures, etc., were integrated, incorporated, and that's how the cultural synthesis has taken roots. And that tradition, that trend has continued during the Nizam's period, particularly in the 19th century when the nationalist movement was taking place. Therefore, the nationalist movement here, cannot be sort of identified with any community, though the Hindus were in the majority. But in the 1885, after the formation of the International Congress, when the conferences were held, there was overwhelming participation. And that was, in fact, that culminated in the Khilafat movement. Not so much in the non-cooperation movement, because factually speaking, non-cooperation movement was not that active in Hyderabad state. For that matter, civil disciplines movement. But Khilafat is very, very important. Khilafat again has reinforced the legacy of Turebaz Khan and Ramji Gond, in the sense that in the Khilafat movement, though it was a kind of a religious cause, exposed, in terms of the dislodgement of the Turkish emperor, but we see clearly in the Khilafat movement, the secular nationalism, playing its role in terms of, while Asghar Hassan, Mirza Humayun, they were in the lead in terms of organizing, these anti-British movements. And then the Charkas, as Session Sir was mentioning, Charkas, they were brought from Bombay, and it was the so-called Muslim elite, who in fact popularized the Charka movement, taking a clue perhaps from Gandhi. And they gave up their, dress in the paisama, kurta, and wore khadi, and then popularized Charka as a symbol of Swadeshi. Though the Vande Mataram movement of 1905 was not very, very popular in Hyderabad state, but the spirit of nationalism is very much present. Even in 1905, what we see in Hyderabad is, of course, as Session also hinted, but did not elaborate. In 1905, we see revolutionaries from Maharashtra, those who are associated with Avinava Bharat Society and other underground revolutionary associations, they were taking shelter in Hyderabad. And these akhadas, these physical, training institutes becoming the center for all these, revolutionaries. And therefore, the Nizam, of course, put a strict ban on the akhadas, though some of those Hindu historians now trying to characterize it as a Hindu versus Muslim. No, the akhadas were also playing a role, in terms of being shelter to revolutionaries. Therefore, Nizam had to, ban them or, put surveillance against them and so on and so, but not from the point of view of religion. It is purely a political act. The anti-Nizam revolutionaries being given shelter in these akhadas, in these in this underground movement where Arya Samajis were very, very active. But that again, in my view, should not be seen as Hindu versus Muslim. So therefore, the Khilafat was, in my view, is a culmination of the process of secular, non-religious, nationalistic articulation. And though we do not have the kind of a movement that British India or Coastal Andhra witnessed, in terms of non-cooperation movement, but here there are some signs also. For example, in 1920s, soon after the Khilafat movement, responding to the call of Gandhi, some of the students of Hyderabad, they gave up their studies, particularly, Akbar Ali Khan, Dr. Jayasuriya, and so on, and others who are studying in Aligarh Muslim University and Bombay, etc. They gave up their studies and came back and participated in them. So that again shows that how, in terms of their articulation of anti-British and anti-Nizam feelings, the communities come together, and therefore they kind of played an important role. Therefore, in the 1940s, when the peasant movement had taken a definite shape, given the, in my view, given the foundations laid in the Telangana society, that secular nationalism flourished, and it got, in fact, culminated in the 1940s. When, for instance, when Bandagi was to fight against the Vishnuru Jamindar, he was not fighting as a Muslim, though the ruler is a Muslim, and there is this concept of Anal Malik, all the Muslims are rulers, etc., was not there. He, as the peasant, as the victim of landlord, linking it to, of course, to the Nizam, he was fighting his case, and he was supported by the Hindu, so-called Hindus again. He was defended in the court of law, in the Janagam court, by none other than Kondalakshmi Bapuji. So therefore, that unity between the communities could be seen in terms of this articulation. So if Tirumali's question to be answered, yes, well, by 1920s, yes, in Telangana society, for that matter, in Hyderabad state, there was this longing for freedom. Freedom is defined not in terms of just political liberation from the rule of the British, as it was understood, but also against liberation from the feudal oppression, autocratic oppression. In a broader sense, that was articulated in the 1920s and 30s, predominantly by the educated elite. The people like, Madapati Hanumantarao, Mandumalanna, Narsingarao, and so on and so forth. But by the 1940s, when the subaltern groups, the peasants, and also I must say, in the 1930s, the radicalization of the nationalist forces, in terms of the formation of the Comrades Association, the All Hyderabad Students Association, All Hyderabad Trade Union Congress, and the Hyderabad Communist Party. Now, I argue here, the foundations laid in the Turebaz Khan's uprising got a kind of a fruition, so to speak, in the 1940s. Just look at the social composition of Hyderabad Comrades Association. Out of the 9 names, 7 are Muslims. And more so, they were Shias. They're not the Orthodox Sunnis. They were Shias. And same is the case with the All Hyderabad Students Union. Of course, there were B. Narsingarao, C. Chanmantrao, and a few other so-called Hindus are also there. But predominantly, majority were the so-called Muslims. And All Hyderabad Trade Union Congress too. Mainuddin was in the forefront, of course, along with Raj Bahadur Kaur. So the 1930s uprising, the nationalist consciousness that is growing, is encompassing these secular aspects. And therefore, when the peasant movement was launched, that was already a kind of a fruition of this broad cosmopolitan cultural articulation. Therefore, even at the height of the peasant struggle, it never took a communal turn. I think most of us have researched so far. But what we have not adequately exposed is the fact that how come that in a context in which the ruler was a Muslim, the majority of his subjects were Hindus, but it never took a communal turn, in spite of the fact that both Hindu communalism and Muslim communalism were active. Of course, from the 1920s, it is Arya Samaj, and then in the 1930s, Hindu Mahasabha, and of course, including V.D. Savarkar, in spite of their what you call doctrinal exposition of characterizing the anti-Nizam struggle as defense of Hindu rights. No, that did not take roots in the Telangana society. That's number one. Number two, in the 1940s, on the eve of the Telangana armed struggle, already this trend was very strong that the village Muslim, he never conceived himself as belonging to the ruling class. He was one, thanks to the Sufi faith, Sufi impact of Sufism, the role of Dargah, the role of Urus, and in Telangana society, it has never been communalized. It has never been communalized in spite of but the dark period comes, of course, in the last 3 years, or rather two and a half years or so of the Nizam rule in the form of the Razakar atrocities. Even then, I argued because a friend from Delhi was curious to know that Razakars means Muslims. No, he said. I told him, no, Razakars cannot be equated with the Muslims, in spite of the communal interpretation that is given in recent times. After all, Razakars were given shelter by the Hindu Jamindars, Vishnu Deshmukh, for example, Jannareddy Pratap Reddy, and a host of instances can be given. And of course, some of the Dalits, some of the a section of the Dalits, a subcaste of the Dalits, were also so-called Razakars in that sense. They were part of the. But majority of the Telangana society was never characterized in terms of the binaries. Therefore, communalism as an ideology of articulation did not take preeminence. That's what I'm saying. In spite of the Razakars, the Telangana society remained immune to this, virus, this poisonous, indoctrination. And therefore, this was possible because of the strong foundation that was laid over a period of time from, let us say, 1857 to the 1940s, and through the Khilafat movement. And therefore, one of the important reasons that why communalism was not a significant trend within the anti-Nizam, anti-British movements. Just, I always used to say, just compare the situation in UP, for example, in Aryavarta, in UP, Bihar, and so on. Along with nationalism, communalism was equally an important force to reckon with. And today, researches have been done. Gyan Pandey and others, have shown clearly how, along with the growth of nationalism, communalism was an integral part of the nationalist consciousness and nationalist mobilization. Whereas in the case of Hyderabad, it was absent. Now, the crucial question to answer is why it is absent in Hyderabad state, in spite of the fact that we have a autocratic, so-called Muslim rule in this part of the country. And this, this question to me is important to showcase, so to speak, the distinctive feature of the anti-Nizam and anti-British movements in Hyderabad since the late 19th century. The second important thing I would like to argue as part of my recent work, that there has always been, particularly in the Telangana region, of course, compared to the north, the Aryavarta, it has been the lower castes who have been in the forefront of these struggles, whether they may be anti-feudal struggles, anti-Nizam struggles, even social reform movements. Now, one distinctive feature of the subaltern articulation of Telangana society is very well demonstrated in the founding of the Adi, the 1906. The foundation was laid for the Dalit movement by the great, Dalit leader Bhagyaredi Varma. Long before the Arya Samaj, long before the Brahma Samaj, long before the other upper caste-led social movements, it was the Dalits who were an important factor in articulating, liberation of independence in a broader sense, from caste oppression, from feudal oppression, and of course, towards independence. So the rise of Dalit movement in 1906, that is 25 years before Mahatma Gandhi launched the so-called Harijana uplift movement, is almost 20 years before Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar launched the Dalit movement. It was Hyderabad which showed in terms of Dalit articulation. I mean, here again, I link it to the fact that Dalits were one of the few important social groups that benefited out of this colonial modernity in the form of Christian missionary activities. This I certainly hold. Why is it that in a feudal aristocratic society, Dalits become so vocal and articulate? That was just because the Christian missionaries, since the 1850s, 1870s to be precise, but the Catholic missions were already here 100 years before the Protestant missions. It was the Protestant missionaries who took the modernity to the Dalits in terms of establishing education institutions, in terms of establishing health centers, in terms of what you call bringing in them this notion of, modernity. So perhaps Dalits was the first important social group which was exposed to use my teacher's characterization, colonial modernity. So therefore, in Hyderabad, not in coastal Andhra, that was, Adi Andhra Mahasabha was founded after 10 years after, the Dalit movement in Hyderabad. Again, it was Bhagyaredi Varma who inaugurated the first Adi Andhra conference and the Adi Andhra movement taken cue from Telangana, so-called, backward region under the autocratic Nizam. So therefore, the modernity that was mediated through the Christian missionaries in Telangana is a significant factor, because it is so in the context in which today the Hindutva forces are coming heavily on these minorities, Christian minorities, for example. So I would say the origins of the Dalit liberation lay in the Christian missionary activities of taking modernity to this period, and including the women, the Dalit women. The first teachers, the first professionals, the first, what you call handicraftsmen were the Dalit women. They were first exposed to the modern occupations. Again, there's a disjunction between caste and occupation that was brought about during the late 19th century. And therefore, in the village society, when the communists came in the 1940s, insofar as the communist movement was able to absorb these lower castes and communities, and of course also taking a cue from the Dalits, the other lower castes, the Padmashalis, for example, because who are exposed to Bombay through migration. So both Christianity and migration played an important role in the modernity of Hyderabad state. The Padmashalis, for example, the Munur Kapus, the Mudirajus, they all have started long before the Reddy Mahajan Sabha, which has come into being in 1980. The Velama Association that came about in 1930s. So therefore, as a matter of fact, historically speaking, the Dalits, Bahujans were in the forefront of these movements, social reform movements, anti-Nizam struggles, and the anti-British struggles. Again, as I said, taking cue from Turebas Khan's legacy. So given this, the Hyderabad freedom struggle had this unique feature of being secular, of being non-sectarian, of being not divisive, so to speak. And the culmination of it has come in the form of the Telangana armed struggle. And there again, when the communist movement, when it was suppressed after the military entry, Union Army came into Hyderabad state and then suppressed the movement. When the communists went into the agency areas, I mean, here, this is very important. This we have not adequately explained. See, when the communists went into the agency areas, again there, I'm reminded of the Ramji Gond legacy. In the Khammam area, in Palansa, in Mulugu, in Parkal, the communists were sheltered by the Koyas, more particularly Koyas, to some extent Gonds, after Komaram Bhimu and later. The Koyas were, both men and women, were very much drawn into this anti-feudal, anti-colonial struggle, and it produced the leadership from within. There was one great warrior. We talk about, of course, Komaram Bhimu, Ramji Gond, but the Koya tiger, he is called Soyam Gangulu. Soyam Gangulu was a nightmare to the Indian army, and of course to the feudal elements in the area. And therefore, I see, just as in the 1850s and 1860s, the tribals, they gave shelter to the outsiders, and this time, it is the communist ideology, communism, as a liberation ideology that has come from outside, but they imbibed it, and then Soyam Gangulu was the manifestation of this the long established tradition of this secular nationalism, and therefore in 1948, even after the military action, the communists were able to sustain to that extent with the help of the Koyas, because the Koyas, like the Gonds and other tribals, they inherited this long drawn heritage of struggle against oppression. So of course the military, the way it committed the atrocities are unparalleled. They far exceeded than the Razakars. In spite of that, the tribes, the Koya tribes, particularly both men and women, sustained the anti-feudal, anti-autocratic, anti-authoritarian struggles. And therefore, I argue, I conclude by saying that this long-established tradition of a secular tradition, of a cosmopolitan tradition, of a tradition which is inclusive, is very much present in the Hyderabad freedom struggle from 1857 to 1948. So thank you for giving this opportunity. I stop here, and if there are any queries, questions, are welcome. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor Radba. It's a great insights. In fact, of course, we heard about Rabaji Khan, but the remaining stories are really, they're really, eye-opener to, even though Telangana people. Of course, Telangana armed struggle is, on our overhead. We really forget all these, heroes somehow. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Now I request Professor Sudharani Garu to react over this, and of course to summarize entire today's events. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your excellent rendering. This was a perfect coordination between the two speakers. The first case is Session sir spoke about early anti-British revolts, which we just can't ignore them just for the sake that they are individualistic or they didn't. Because the entire I'm afraid I won't agree with Trimal sir also, because the notion of nationalism is itself is a big question, because whose nationalism is that? Like, the
Whose
people of
nationalism?
India, yeah, people of India are suffering with the several other issues which are being there for centuries. So we have seen Makoddin Alladorataram. Kusma Dharman sang it, and Garimella Satyanarayana says that Makoddi Telladorotanamu. Garimella's song responding to this, Kusma Dharman says Makoddi Nalladorotanamu. So after British leave, what happens to the communities which has been, how they perceived? This is what matters to the now generation to ponder over. What it matters to be a nation, to be the citizens of the nation, because Ambedkar has extensively deliberated upon this aspect of nationalism. So we just can't dismiss the thing that, what Mahipatram or Mubarizuddaullah's resistance or revolt against the British, which is much before, when we say that 1857 revolt of Jhansi is a first war of independence, why can't Bolaram mutiny is also be not on the same par, but to be equated in the protest of anti-British protest list in the historical accounts? So regional, with the Hyderabad history and Telangana history has been much neglected, and by even keeping ourselves silent to these incidents were started much before the national so-called national movement you are talking about we are talking about. We just can't put up a boundary to this and says that this is national movement and this is not. Any voice of protest from the regional history all put together, because national movement we see always think it's a geographical, like in all over India, a kind of a thing, but there are several unsung heroes which Sessions are brought out to, and it's much to be explored now. Beyond this also there were several incidents. So this kind of research is a very challenging one, and we need to adopt to this. The pre-1857 revolts against the Nizam, not Nizam, against the British has to be brought into daylight. And whereas Adapa Satyanarayan sir, this thing is also a very interesting line of presentation is taking the Turebaz Khan, because people have been looking towards Turebaz Khan attack is just an attack at the residency. No, it has much message to carry, and which ignited the which paved a way for the future nationalist like kind of freedom movement in the Telangana region, particularly Hyderabad state, precisely. So the Ramji Gond uprising, Turebaz Khan and Ramji Gond, which denotes the secular nationalist consciousness facilitated in the broad-based people's mobilization against both the Nizam as well as the British colonialism. So this consciousness later crystallized what Sir says is at the end of the 19th century with the struggle against Nizam and feudal autocratic forces. So this, the later starting of organization, Chanda Railway Scheme is an incident. And then Andhra Jana Kendra Sangam, soon after the Chanda incident, the starting of Andhra Jana Kendra Sangam, and then Andhra Mahasabha later, and then Hyderabad, though it was before it was born, Hyderabad State Congress was banned by the Nizam government. And there are several Deshabhimani, Rayat, and several newspapers, journals, bringing to the people the valuable message of the freedom struggle all over India to the people. And they were also, Deshabhimani was banned in 1921. Aromuda Iyengar's report also talks about that this is, the contents are objectionable, and it has to be banned. So this kind of a a fear that is prevailed. And this is very interesting observation, sir, that when Bombay, Calcutta, and many other places, communal clashes have been occurring in the 1940s and throughout the 1940s. But that was absent in Hyderabad state. This shows the unity of the people, the secular outlook of the movement, which is because Padmaja Naidu and all, the leaders from the Andhra also, there was a lot of interaction between them. And Subhash Chandra Bose, the Hyderabad people were a part of the Indian National Army. So this kind of Azad Hind Force of Subhash Chandra Bose, yeah, sir. So this students movement, comrades association, Communist Party, All India Trade Union, Trade Congress, and Komrum Bhimus, the ultimate sacrifice in the fight and his martyrdom. And this legacy is still, it's a people's struggle, which we could see in Hyderabad state and Telangana precisely, than it's the kind of, leaders-led movements. The people led the movements here. So that is what made it more interesting, more I appeal the younger scholars, please look into this regional history. You have a rich history here and contributing a lot to the national movement, what you can say it, because the regional regions comprise the nation, or the nation itself is not a geography, it's a people that make the nation. So this kind of history from the below, and the kind of legacy from the Telangana, it has to be an inspiring stories, and more lectures of this kind. And someone in the chat box written that there are heavy rains in Kuppam region. They couldn't hear it. Everything got disconnected. But I'll tell you that this has been recorded, and will be two of the lectures will be there in the YouTube channel. You can watch it anytime. And this is also everything lectures have been getting transcripted, and will definitely bring out the book, Chakrapani sir, that from Department of History, with the help of my colleagues. I would like to bring out these two essays in a book form also, because a lot of things need to be done, and I request the scholars also to please send your opinion in print, and keeping it to lectures and print will bring out a volume. And the series of lectures which we have been conducting on the eve of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, and 40 years, completion of 40 years of our Ambedkar Open University, which is going to be celebrated on August 26th of this month. So we all thank you from the bottom of my heart, and from our rest of my colleagues also, for your patience and keeping with us with the technical faults. Thank you so much, sir, both of you, for an excellent connection between the two lectures. I could see pre-1857 and post-1857, and from the people's point of view. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Sudharani Garu. Yeah, on behalf of faculty, I request both the speakers, because both of you are very great writers also, I know. So kindly give us detailed script. As Professor Sudharani said, the connection between British against British revolts, and also against Nizam revolts. I mean, this will be going to be a great contribution, and we would like to, of course, as Madam said, we can publish it. Apart from that, we would like to put up everything on our OER repository, which can be reachable, to everyone across the world. Anybody can share that and read it. So it's people's history. So thank you, sir. We do that, and I think Professor Srinivas and Dr. Dayakar, apart from Professor Sudharani, they working very hard to present various aspects of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. I think one more event also they are bringing up. So let us wait. Meanwhile, I request both the authors, please, send your full lectures in written form as early as possible. Number
A
one.
small request, Chakrapani.
Madam?
A small request, all the participants, please fill up the feedback forms, so that certificate will be generated and given to you at the end of
Yeah,
the
very good. Yeah, that also, you can take that certificate, those certificates also. On behalf of faculty, I thank you, both the authors, both the speakers, as well as our discussant, Professor Sudharani. I think Srinivas, over to Srinivas Vadanam,
Next, Dayakar, sir. Dayakar is
head department of history. Dayakar, are you there? Now, Dr. Dayakar, our associate professor of history, will present formal vote of thanks.
Please submit the feedback forms, all the participants, please. You just submit.
Dayakar?
It's been generated.
Yeah.
Sir, on behalf of the Department of History, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, I thank Professor K.S. Session, sir, Professor, former head Department of History, University of Hyderabad, who delivered an excellent lecture on early British revolts in Hyderabad state, 1800 to 1857. Thank you very much, sir. I thank our beloved teacher, Professor Arpa Satyanarayan, sir, Professor, Department of History, Usmania University, who delivered a good lecture on people's resistance against the Nizam. I thank our dynamic dean, Professor Ganta Chakrapani garu, who are given a valuable suggestions, inputs to our history department, and who actively participated in our webinar. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I thank our energetic director, academic, Professor E. Sudharani garu, Senior Professor, Department of History, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, who designed the webinar and given a valuable inputs in our webinar. Thank you, madam. I thank our head Department of History, Professor Vadanam Srinivasrao sir, who given a well-designed program and also who taken care about the success of the seminar. I am very much thankful to sir. I thank senior faculty members, heads of the departments, heads of the branches, deans, directors, and faculty members across the Telugu states, research scholars, students, friends. Thank you very much. Thank you who are participated and patiently listen our lecture. I thank our computer section, EMMRC, PRO, artist Venkat Swami, and office subordinates of Dean Faculty of Social Science and Director Academic Staff. Thank you very much. Thank you, one and all.
Sir, already we have given feedback form in chat box, sir. You can get that and fill the form and please send back. You can get certificates for that. Thank you very much. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. The feedback forms. Yeah, if you submit the feedback form, the certificates will be issued later. Thank you so much, all of you, to be with us for all this time, though we have exceeded our time. Thank you so much, the resource persons, Session sir and Adapa sir, and all the participants.